Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're not just reading a book, we are entering a labyrinth.
A very ancient, very complex labyrinth.
Exactly. We are tackling what is arguably the ultimate thought experiment in Western history. And I want to start by putting you, the listener, directly into a scenario.
Great, let's set the stage.
Okay, so imagine it's a dark, stormy night. There's been a massive earthquake. The ground right in front of you splits open, revealing this deep, dark chasm in the earth. And, being the curious person you are, you actually climb down into it.
Which is the classic setup for one of the most famous provocations in all of philosophy.
It really is. So you go down there and you find a bronze horse. It's hollowed out. It has these little windows in it. You peek inside and there's a giant corpse. And on the finger of this corpse is a gold ring.
Just sitting there for the taking.
Right. You take the ring, you climb back out, and later on, while you're sitting around a fire with your fellow shepherds, you're just sort of, twisting this ring on your finger, and you realize something absolutely terrifying.
The ultimate superpower.
Yes. When you turn the setting of the ring inward toward your palm, you vanish. You are completely invisible.
The Ring of Gyges. It is the original invisibility cloak, but with much higher stakes than Harry Potter, I think.
Much higher stakes. Because the question the source material is asking isn't like, what cool pranks would you pull on your friends? The question is, if you had that ring, if you could just walk right into the palace, seduce the queen, kill the king, and take the throne for yourself, all with literally zero chance of ever being caught, would you still behave?
Would you still be a so-called good person?
Right. Would you?
It cuts right to the absolute heart of human nature. Glaucon, the character who actually tells this story in our text today, he argues that if you gave that exact same ring to a living saint and to a hardened criminal, they would both end up doing the exact same thing.
Because the temptation is just too great.
Because of human nature. He says the only reason we are just, the only reason we follow the rules, is because we are terrified of the consequences of being unjust. Remove the consequences, you remove the justice.
And that right there is the massive challenge we are facing today. We're doing a deep dive into Plato's Republic. Now, this is the foundational text of political philosophy, but we aren't going to treat it like some dusty museum piece today.
No, absolutely not. It's incredibly relevant.
We're treating it as a mission. And the mission of this deep dive is to see if we can prove Glaucon wrong. To see if the text can prove that even if you have the ring, even if you could get away with absolutely anything, it is still somehow better for you personally to be just.
And that is a massive, massive undertaking. I mean, most people, if they're being truly honest with themselves in the dark of night, might really struggle to answer that. Why should I be good if I can get the entire kingdom for free?
Exactly.
So to answer that, Plato takes us on this wild journey that basically builds an entire universe. We go from the psychology of a single individual human soul all the way up to the motion of the stars in the cosmos.
It's a trip. But before we get into the heavy lifting, the macro stuff, let's just set the scene. Because the way this book is written, it isn't a dry lecture hall. It's actually just a hangout.
Right, it's a dialogue. It takes place in the Piraeus, which is the bustling port city of Athens. It's a bit rougher, a bit more cosmopolitan, a bit more diverse than Athens proper. And Socrates has gone down there with Glaucon to see a religious festival for a new foreign goddess.
Right, they're just taking in the sights.
Yeah, they've said their prayers, they've seen the procession, and they're just trying to head home.
But they get stopped. And it's almost like a playful arrest, right? Paul Marcus, this young guy, sends his slave to literally grab Socrates' cloak from behind and basically says, hey, you can't leave unless you're stronger than all of us.
Which is a joke, obviously, among friends, but it brilliantly sets up the core theme of power immediately, right there on page 1. It's this tension between might makes right and persuasion.
And since Socrates, he loves a good conversation more than anything else in the world, he agrees to stay. They go over to the house of Cephalus, who is Paul Marcus's father. He's this very wealthy aging arms manufacturer.
A respected patriarch figure.
Yeah. And the conversation starts, as these things often do at parties, with some small talk about getting older.
Which naturally leads them into the very first attempt to define what we're actually talking about today. What is justice? Because everyone sitting in that room thinks they know what it is, right up until Socrates starts asking his famous questions.
Right. So Cephalus, the old successful businessman, he takes the first crack at it.
Cephalus really represents conventional, traditional morality. He's rich, he's old, he's feeling his mortality, and he's starting to worry about the afterlife. For him, justice is very transactional.
Like an accounting ledger.
Exactly. It's about telling the truth and paying your debts. If you owe a sacrifice to a god, you do it. If you owe money to a man, you pay it back. It's a very strict law and order definition.
Which sounds totally reasonable to most of us. Don't lie, pay what you owe. But Socrates, being Socrates, he finds the fatal flaw in that definition almost instantly.
He does. He uses this famous hypothetical, the madman and the weapon analogy. He asks Cephalus, okay, imagine a good friend lends you a weapon, a sword, when he is perfectly sane. By your definition, you owe him that weapon. It's his property.
Right.
But then, let's say he goes completely out of his mind. He goes insane. He comes back to your house, foaming at the mouth, demanding his sword back. Is it just to give it to him?
And obviously the answer has to be no. Because if you hand a deadly weapon back to a maniac, you're morally responsible for whatever murder he commits next. So just blindly paying your debts isn't always the just thing to do.
Exactly. Socrates is showing that true justice requires situational judgment, not just blind rule following. So Cephalus, to his credit, gracefully bows out of the argument. He actually physically leaves to go make a sacrifice, literally paying his dues to the gods, and his son Polemarchus steps in to take over the argument.
Polemarchus tries to save the family honor here. He quotes the poet Simonides, who was kind of like a pop culture authority back then. He says, justice is giving everyone what they are owed. But he refines his dad's definition. He says, justice is helping your friends and harming your enemies.
Now, this is a very standard, very widely accepted Greek view at the time. It's tribal morality. Unwavering loyalty to your crew, and total hostility to the outsider. It's honestly the morality of the mafia, or frankly, the basis of a lot of modern foreign policy.
But Socrates completely picks this apart too. And he has two main objections. The first one is about human knowledge, or our lack of it. He says, are we actually any good at knowing who our real friends are?
Right. I mean, we all know people who seem incredibly charming but are actually total snakes behind your back. And we know people who seem prickly and rude but are actually fiercely loyal.
We get it wrong all the time.
We do. So Socrates argues that if justice is helping friends and harming enemies, and you mistakenly identify a bad man as your friend, you end up using justice to help the wicked and harm the good. And everyone agrees that cannot possibly be justice.
And then his second objection to Polemarchus is even deeper. It's about the very nature of what it means to harm someone.
This is a profound philosophical shift in the dialogue. Socrates argues that to harm something is fundamentally to make it worse at being what it is. If you harm a horse, it becomes a worse horse. If you harm a dog, it becomes a worse dog.
Right.
So if you harm a human being, you are degrading their human virtue. You are actually making them more unjust.
So his chain of logic is basically this. Justice is a virtue. A virtue cannot produce its exact opposite. Heat cannot produce cold. Dryness cannot produce moisture. So a just person cannot logically use their justice to make someone else unjust. Therefore, it is never just to harm anyone, ever.
Which is a staggeringly radical, almost pacifist statement to make in a highly militarized warrior culture like ancient Athens.
Oh, yeah.
But before they can even really settle on that bombshell, the entire conversation just gets violently hijacked.
Yes. Enter the wolf, Thrasymachus.
The description of him in the text is so vivid. He's been sitting there the whole time, just boiling over with rage, hunching himself up like a wild beast, getting ready to pounce. And finally, he literally hurls himself into the center of the conversation.
He's so sick of Socrates playing these polite little word games. Thrasymachus wants to talk about the real ugly world.
And his definition of justice is one of the most famous cynicism bombs in all of history. He just shouts at them, justice is nothing else than the advantage of the stronger.
We really need to unpack that because it sounds incredibly modern.
It does. Thrasymachus is what we might call a legal positivist today. He looks around at the real world and sees all these different regimes. Some are democracies, some are tyrannies, some are aristocracies. And he asks, in every single one of these systems, who makes the laws? The rulers do.
Right, whoever holds the power makes the rules.
And do they make those laws out of the goodness of their hearts to help the common people? No, says Thrasymachus. They make laws solely to help themselves stay in power and get rich. A democracy makes democratic laws to benefit the majority. A tyrant makes tyrannical laws to benefit himself.
And they label those laws as justice?
Exactly. They define justice as simply obeying our laws. So if you follow the law, you are literally just serving the selfish interest of the ruling class. You are essentially a sheep being sheared for the master's benefit, and you're thanking them for it.
He's basically calling the strictly just, law-abiding man a sucker. He says the unjust man is the smart one. The unjust man evades the taxes, he cheats in his business deals, and he wins. The just man pays all his taxes, follows all the rules, and ends up poor and exhausted. So Thrasymachus is arguing that injustice is actually a virtue because it works. It gets you the stuff you want.
And he takes it all the way to its ultimate logical conclusion. He points to the tyrant, the person who doesn't just steal a little bit, but steals everything. The temples, the public treasury, the very freedom of the citizens. And what happens to him? He isn't punished. He is called blessed and happy by everyone who fears him.
Right.
Thrasymachus is effectively saying, Socrates, please stop talking about this fairy tale morality. Life is about raw power. Get the ring of ages, take the kingdom, and be happy.
This is such a hard argument to beat, because when you look around the real world, it often looks exactly like he's right. The ruthless corporate CEO, the corrupt dictator, they seem to be doing pretty well for themselves. How does Socrates even begin to dismantle that worldview?
He starts very carefully using the craft analogy. He traps Thrasymachus inside his own logic. Thrasymachus admits that ruling a city is an art or a craft, much like the art of medicine or the art of piloting a ship.
Okay, that makes sense.
So Socrates asks him, does a doctor, in the strict, precise sense of being a doctor, seek his own personal advantage, or does he seek the advantage of the patient?
Well, the doctor studies the human body. He's trying to heal the patient. If his only goal is to make money, then he's practicing the art of business, not the art of medicine.
Precisely. The pure art of medicine is focused entirely on the health of the body. The pure art of piloting a ship is about the safety of the crew and the cargo, not inflating the captain's ego. Every true art rules over its specific subject in order to improve that subject.
I see where this is going.
So if ruling is truly an art, then the true ruler must seek the advantage of the ruled, not himself. Thrasymachus tries to argue that a shepherd fattens his sheep just to eat them or sell them. But Socrates counters that, as a shepherd, his only true art is caring for the sheep. The money-making part is a totally separate art.
Thrasymachus absolutely hates this. The text says he's blushing, he's sweating profusely, he's physically uncomfortable, but he can't break the logic.
He's cornered.
But Socrates drops another really interesting point right here. He says that because true ruling is actually just hard, selfless work, because it's entirely about looking after the needs of others, no one would ever do it for free.
Right. He says there are only 3 ways to convince someone to rule. You can pay them with money, pay them with honor, or pay them with a penalty.
A penalty? That sounds backward.
It does, but Socrates says the truly best, most virtuous men don't want money because that's shameful. They don't care about public honor or fame because they aren't vain. So they will only agree to rule because of a severe penalty. And the absolute worst penalty for refusing to rule is to be ruled by someone worse than yourself.
That is such a fantastic line. It's like saying, I'm only running for mayor because if I don't, that horrible guy over there is going to ruin the town.
Exactly. It's ruling out of self-defense. But even though Socrates logically wins this round against Thrasymachus, they realize they haven't fully answered the core challenge from the very beginning.
The ring of Gyges problem.
Right. Is the just life actually happier? Or is it just this necessary, miserable drudgery you do to keep bad men out of power? To really answer this, Socrates proposes a massive shift in scale. He says, imagine we are trying to read very small letters from a distance and we're struggling, but then we realize the exact same letters are written much larger on a billboard nearby.
He wants to look at justice on a macro level. He wants to find justice in an entire city first, hoping it will be much easier to spot than trying to find it hidden inside a single person's soul. And this is the birth of the famous city soul analogy.
So they decide to build a completely theoretical city from scratch in their minds. They start with what Socrates calls the healthy city. It's based purely on absolute human need. You need food, you need shelter, you need clothes. So you get a farmer, a house builder, a weaver.
And they realize pretty quickly that one person doing one specific job is just way more efficient. Division of labor? The farmer shouldn't be making his own shoes?
Exactly. And the city they describe sounds incredibly idyllic, like a peaceful agrarian commune. They drink cheap wine, they sleep on beds of sweet-smelling leaves, they eat simple barley cakes. There's no war, no poverty, just simple, healthy living.
Sounds nice. But Glaucon, who remembers this young, wealthy, aristocratic guy, he jumps in and completely ruins the vibe. He says, Socrates, if you were building a city for pigs, this is exactly what you'd feed them.
He's appalled by the lack of culture.
Yeah, he wants his relishes, he wants roasted meat, rich sauces, comfortable couches, imported perfumes, fancy artwork. He wants a real sophisticated civilization.
And this right here is the major pivot point for the entire political theory of the Republic. Socrates calls this new, luxurious version the fevered city. It's sick with desire, but he agrees to build it for Glaucon, and he immediately points out the dark consequence of this desire.
The cost of luxury.
Yes. If you want luxury, if everyone suddenly demands to eat meat every day, for example, you need a lot of pigs and cattle. If you have all those animals, you need huge pastures, you need swine herds. If everyone wants fine wooden furniture, you need to cut down forests for lumber.
And suddenly, the modest amount of land your healthy city started with just isn't big enough anymore.
Precisely. You have to take a slice of your neighbor's land. And guess what? Your neighbor has also caught the fever of luxury, so they want a slice of your land too. Socrates concludes that the origin of almost all war is simply the endless desire for more wealth than we actually need.
Wow. So just because we want the fancy sauce on our meat, we have to invent an army.
Yes. And keeping with their strict rule of one man, one job, we can't just have our farmers dropping their plows and fighting with pitchforks when the enemy attacks.
No, they wouldn't be good at it.
Right. We need a highly specialized professional class of warriors. Socrates calls this new class the Guardians.
And introducing a standing army creates a terrifying new problem for the city. If you suddenly have this distinct class of people who are physically stronger than everyone else, armed to the teeth, and professionally trained in the art of killing, what on earth stops them from just turning around and killing the citizens? What protects the flock of sheep from the very dogs guarding them?
That is the eternal defining political question: who watches the watchmen? Socrates' answer is that we have to carefully breed and train these guardians to have a very specific, almost paradoxical psychological nature. He compares them to pedigree watchdogs.
How does that comparison work?
Think about a truly excellent watchdog. It is incredibly gentle and loving to the people it knows, its family, but it is fiercely aggressive and terrifying to strangers. Socrates playfully calls this a highly philosophical nature.
A dog is a philosopher.
Because the dog bases its entire judgment of the world purely on knowledge. If it knows you, it loves you. If it is ignorant of you, it attacks. Therefore, the dog's soul is driven by a love of knowing.
Okay, so to get these philosophical warrior dogs to protect the city without destroying it, Socrates outlines an education system for them that is, frankly, just total unapologetic censorship.
It absolutely is. He goes through all the revered Greek myths, the works of Homer and Hesiod, which were basically their Bible, and he takes a massive red pen to everything. He bans any story, any poem where the gods do evil things.
More fun myths.
None. No gods shape-shifting, no gods lying to mortals, no gods having petty fights with each other. He argues that if the guardians are to grow up honest, brave, and stable, they simply cannot be taught that Zeus assaults women, or that the great hero Achilles cries like a baby when he loses a friend. They must believe the divine is perfectly good and unchanging.
He even gets into the weeds of banning certain musical keys and instruments. No sorrowful weeping melodies, no soft, relaxing drinking songs, only the strict driving rhythms that make a person brave in battle or temperate in peacetime. It is social engineering on a massive granular scale.
And it's all done to produce a soul that is perfectly balanced. Socrates warns that too much athletic training in warfare makes a person a savage brute, but too much music and poetry makes him incredibly soft and vulnerable. You need the absolute perfect harmony of both to make a guardian.
But even with this incredibly strict lifelong education, Socrates thinks the city still needs one big unifying story to hold everyone together and keep them in their lanes. He calls it the noble lie, or the myth of the metals. And I will say, this part always makes modern readers deeply uncomfortable.
Oh, it should. It's a very calculated propaganda tool. The idea is that the rulers will tell all the citizens a grand myth, that their entire youth, their education, everything they remember was actually just a dream. In reality, they were being formed deep inside the earth, which is their true mother. So every citizen is literally a sibling born from the same soil. They all belong to the land.
That's the intense nationalism part, the ultimate blood and soil narrative to make them defend the city to the death.
Right. But then comes the rigid caste system aspect. The myth goes on to say that when the gods forged them in the earth, they mixed different metals into their souls. Those few who are capable of ruling the city have gold mixed into their souls. The auxiliaries, which is the soldier class, have silver. And the massive working class, the farmers, shoemakers, builders, they have iron and bronze.
Now wait, It's not strictly hereditary, though, is it? Because that's a really key distinction he makes.
It is a crucial distinction. Socrates insists this must be a pure meritocracy. If a golden ruling parent has a child whose soul shows the traits of iron, that child must be ruthlessly pushed down into the working class. No nepotism allowed. Conversely, if a humble iron-working farmer has a child who displays a golden philosophical soul, that child must be elevated to the ruling class. Because the central oracle predicts that the city will be utterly destroyed if it is ever ruled by iron or bronze.
Okay, so we finally built the physical structure of this perfect city. We have the gold rulers at the top, the silver soldiers protecting them, and the iron workers producing everything. Now, the whole point of this massive detour was to find justice. We wrote the letters large. So looking at the city, where is the justice?
Socrates suggests a process of elimination. They go on a hunt for the 4 cardinal virtues within the city's structure. First, wisdom. Where is the city wise? Clearly in the small class of gold rulers, because they possess the knowledge of how to run the whole city, both its internal affairs and foreign relations.
Makes sense.
Second is courage. That is clearly located in the silver soldiers. They preserve the correct, educated belief about what should and should not be feared, no matter what pains or pleasures they face. Third is temperance or self-discipline. This one is unique. It's not in one class. It's the harmonious agreement spreading across the entire city that the best, the gold, should rule the worst, the iron. It's a shared consensus.
Okay, we found 3, so justice has to be whatever's left over.
Exactly. Socrates says justice is the very foundational principle that made the whole city possible in the first place, minding your own business. It is the simple, powerful idea that each class does the one job it is naturally suited for and critically does not interfere with the others.
So injustice in the city is when the shoemaker gets arrogant and tries to be a general, or when the brave general decides he wants to be the supreme legislator.
Yes. Meddling and role swapping is the ultimate injustice. It destroys the city.
And now comes the massive payoff for the listener. We take this massive political map we just drew, and we shrink it back down. We overlay it onto the single human soul, the small letters.
And it maps perfectly. Socrates argues that the human soul isn't one simple thing. It has 3 distinct parts, exactly mirroring the city. First, there is the rational part, the gold. This is the tiny part of you that loves truth, calculates, and thinks long-term. Second, there is the spirited part, the silver. This is the part of you that feels righteous anger, cares about honor, feels shame, and wants to win. And finally, there is the appetitive part, the bronze and iron. This is the massive, many-headed beast inside you, the part that uncontrollably desires food, drink, sex, and the money to buy those things.
I think we all intimately feel that appetitive part every day. It's the voice that wants to mindlessly scroll social media for hours or eat the second donut when the rational part knows we should be working or eating a salad.
Exactly. And have you ever felt that flash of intense anger or disgust at yourself for eating that second donut?
Oh, definitely.
That anger is your spirited part acting as the ally of your reason, trying to suppress the rogue appetite.
So using this map, what actually is a just man?
A just man is simply someone whose internal psychological hierarchy is correct. Reason is sitting on the throne, steering the ship. Spirit is the obedient soldier, fiercely enforcing reason's commands. And the massive appetite is successfully tamed. It gets fed what it needs to survive, but it is never allowed to make the decisions.
So injustice inside the soul is basically a civil war.
Precisely. It's a rebellion. It's when the appetite, say, a blinding urge for money or a physical addiction stages, a violent coup, overthrows reason and enslaves the whole person to serve that one base desire.
So the deeply unjust man, the one who looks like he's having so much fun doing whatever he wants, is actually in a state of total internal chaos. He's not free. He's a miserable slave to his own endless addictions.
That is exactly Socrates' argument. But hold on, because just as things are making perfect sense, Socrates is about to drop what he calls the 3 waves. These are 3 proposals for the rulers of the city that are so unbelievably radical, he literally fears they will act like massive waves and drown his entire argument in public laughter and outrage.
Yeah, these waves are wild, even by today's standards. Let's hit them. Wave 1 is gender equality among the guardians,
which is staggering. In ancient Athens, women were essentially secluded indoors. They couldn't own property, they couldn't vote, they were completely marginalized. But Socrates goes back to his dog analogy. He asks Glaucon, do we use female watchdogs to hunt and guard the flock alongside the males? Or do we just lock them in the kennel forever just to breed puppies?
And Glaucon has to admit, Any good hunter uses the female dogs for the exact same tasks as the males. They just might be slightly weaker physically.
Right. So Socrates says, logically, if we are going to use women for the exact same highest tasks of ruling and guarding the city, they absolutely must receive the exact same education in music and gymnastics.
He's arguing that while biological differences exist, men might be physically stronger on average. The actual nature of the soul, the pure capacity for wisdom, courage, and leadership, is not gendered at all. So you can and must have female guardians and female philosopher-kings.
It's thousands of years ahead of its time, but then Wave 2 hits, and this one makes people deeply recoil even today. Wave 2 is the complete abolition of the family.
Now, we need to clarify. This rule only applies to the guardian and ruler classes, right? Not the farmers.
Yes, only the elites. But for them, it is total, unmitigated communism. Not just no private property, no gold, no private houses. He means no private, exclusive families. The text says, all wives and children shall be in common.
Meaning, as a parent, you literally do not know who your biological children are.
You have absolutely no idea. Socrates proposes these temporary, state-sanctioned, sacred marriages, which, if we are being honest, are actually rigorous, state-run breeding lotteries. The current rulers secretly rig these lotteries using fake dice so that the absolute best, most heroic men breed with the most outstanding women in order to produce the best possible genetic offspring for the state.
And the parents just think they got lucky in a random draw. Which, for you listening, we have to point out is essentially a blueprint for state-mandated eugenics. We're just reporting what is in the ancient text here, not endorsing it.
Yes, it is pure eugenics, heavily inspired by how they bred hunting birds and racing horses. And it gets more extreme. As soon as these state-sanctioned children are born, they are immediately taken away by nurses to a separate rearing pen in the city. The mothers are brought in to nurse the infants, but extreme precautions are taken so no mother ever recognizes her own biological child.
So how do they even talk about family?
Every child born in a certain designated month will call every adult who made it in the corresponding month father or mother. Every child born around the same time is your brother or sister.
Why? Why would a philosopher propose something so cold and unnatural? What is the goal here?
The goal is to assassinate the word mine. Socrates argues that the private family unit is the greatest enemy of a unified state. Because if I care more about my biological son than your son, I will inevitably become corrupt. I will steal from the public treasury to enrich my own family. I will bend the laws for my kid.
Nepotism destroys the whole meritocracy we just built.
Exactly. Socrates wants the entire ruling class to feel like a single biological organism. He says, when you accidentally smash your finger with a hammer, your body doesn't say, my finger hurts. Your whole body reacts and you say, I hurt. He wants the city to be so radically unified that if one single citizen suffers a loss, the entire city genuinely feels it and says, I hurt.
It is a truly terrifying loss of individuality, but mathematically you see the cold logic of it.
Yeah.
He wants to permanently eliminate any possible conflict of interest.
And just as we are reeling from that, he unleashes the third wave, the biggest one of all, the one that answers the looming question, how could this bizarre, perfect city ever actually exist in the real world?
Right, he drops the most famous quote of the book. Unless philosophers become kings, or those currently called kings genuinely and adequately philosophize, there will be no end to the troubles of humanity.
The philosopher-king. It's a legendary concept. But we have to be very, very careful here. When Plato says philosopher, he absolutely does not mean a modern university professor who writes obscure academic papers. He means a very specific, almost spiritually elevated kind of person.
He defines a philosopher as a lover of the sight of truth.
Yes. And to understand what that means, we have to wade into the metaphysics of the book. This is often the hardest part for people to grasp, but it is deeply rewarding. Socrates draws a hard, bright line between opinion and knowledge. He says regular people are just lovers of sights and sounds. They love beautiful faces, beautiful paintings, beautiful music. But they only have ever-changing opinions about what is beautiful. The true philosopher, however, doesn't just love beautiful things. They love beauty itself, the absolute form of beauty.
Okay, we really need to pause and unpack this. The forms. This is Plato's massive, world-changing idea. What exactly is a form? Is it like a ghost, a blueprint in the sky?
The easiest way to grasp it is through mathematics. Think of a circle. You can draw a circle on a piece of paper right now, but is it a true circle? No. It's imperfect. The ink is bumpy, your hands shook a little. If you loom in close enough, it's jagged. It is an imperfect physical copy. But your mind can understand the mathematical concept of a circle, a perfect 360-degree curve with every point equidistant from the center. That perfect concept exists entirely outside of time and physical space.
It's pure definition.
Exactly. Now, Plato boldly claims that there are eternal, perfect forms for everything in the universe. There's a form of justice, a form of goodness, a form of a bed even. The physical things we touch and see every day are just flawed, temporary shadows or reflections of those perfect eternal forms.
And to try and explain this incredibly abstract idea to his friends, Socrates gives us three of the greatest metaphors in all of literature: the sun, the divided line, and the allegory of the cave. Let's walk through them.
Let's start with the sun analogy. In our physical, visible world, the sun does two vital things. First, it generates light, which allows our physical eyes to see objects. Second, it provides the heat and energy that causes plants and animals to physically grow and exist.
Okay.
Socrates says that in the invisible intellectual world, there is a supreme form called the form of the good. It acts exactly like the sun. It radiates truth, which allows our minds to know things, and it actually gives existence and reality to all the other forms. It is the ultimate, highest source of all reality. It is almost godlike.
So how does a human mind travel from drawing bumpy circles in the dirt all the way up to seeing this blinding form of the good? That's where he introduces the divided line, right?
Yes. He tells Glaucon to imagine a single vertical line cut into 4 unequal sections, moving from the lowest reality at the bottom to the highest at the top. The very bottom section is imagination. This is dealing with literal shadows, reflections in water, or mere drawings. It is the lowest possible level of reality.
Like watching a reflection of a painting.
Exactly. Moving one step up the line, you hit belief. This is the realm of actual physical objects. Trees, tables, animals, your own body. Most humans spend their entire lives perfectly happy in this section, just dealing with physical stuff.
But the philosopher keeps climbing.
Right. Crossing the line into the invisible realm, the third section is thought. This is the realm of mathematics and geometry. You are still using physical diagrams, like drawing a square on a chalkboard, but you are using it to hypothesize about the square itself. You are relying on untested assumptions. Finally, at the very top of the line is understanding, or dialectic. Here, you throw away all physical images. You deal purely with the invisible forms, moving logically from one abstract idea to another, until you finally reach the unhypothetical first principle, the form of the good.
It is a really steep climb. And to make this mental journey painfully clear to everyone, he tells the allegory of the cave.
Arguably the most famous story in all of Western philosophy.
It really is. I'll set it up. He says, imagine a deep, dark, underground cave. Inside this cave, there are prisoners who've been chained to the floor since they were babies. Their legs and their necks are locked in place. They can't turn their heads at all. They can only stare straight ahead at the blank rock wall in front of them.
A horrifying image.
Now behind them, up higher in the cave, a large fire is burning. And between the fire and the backs of the chained prisoners, there is a low wall, kind of like the screen at a puppet theater. And behind that low wall, people are constantly walking back and forth, holding up statues of dogs, horses, trees, people.
So the firelight hits the statues and casts giant, flickering shadows onto the wall right in front of the prisoners.
Exactly. And because the prisoners are locked facing forward, they never see the fire and they never see the statues. All they see, for their entire lives, are the shadows. And they hear the muffled echoes of the puppeteers talking, and they assume the shadows are making the noise.
And because that is the only world they have ever experienced, they absolutely believe with all their hearts that the two-dimensional shadows are the ultimate total reality of the universe. They even make up games. They give out honors and prizes to the prisoner who is the fastest at predicting which shadow is going to slide across the wall next. They genuinely think they are brilliant experts of reality.
Then the twist happens. One single prisoner is suddenly freed from his chains. And Socrates stresses this. It is not a happy, magical moment. The prisoner is forced to stand up. His muscles have completely atrophied. He is forced to turn around and look directly at the fire. The light physically burns his dark, adapted eyes. He is terrified, he is deeply confused, and he desperately just wants to sit back down in the comforting darkness with his friends.
This is Plato telling us that true education is profoundly painful. It is not just stuffing facts into a head. It is a violent turning around of the entire soul.
But the freed prisoner doesn't get to quit. He is physically dragged up the rough, steep, jagged tunnel out of the caves, and he is thrust out into the actual world, into the blazing sunlight. At first, he's completely blinded. The true reality is just too much to handle.
He has to acclimate slowly. First, he can only bear to look at the dark shadows of things on the ground. Then, after a while, he can look at the reflections of trees and mountains and pools of water. Then he can finally look at the actual trees and mountains themselves. Then he looks up at the stars at night, and finally, the ultimate moment. He is able to look directly up into the sky and gaze at the sun itself, the form of the good.
And he has this massive epiphany. He realizes the sun is what causes the seasons, the years, and gives life to everything he is seeing. He finally truly understands the structure of reality. And his first thought is profound pity for his friends still chained down in the dark cave, playing their stupid little shadow-guessing games.
But the story doesn't end with him just enjoying the sunshine. This is where the politics come back in. The philosopher has a strict moral duty to go back down. He has to return to the cave to help the others.
But when he descends back into that pitch-black darkness, having been in the blinding sun, his eyes can't adjust. He is practically blind in the dark now. He stumbles around, he tries to play the shadow-guessing game with the prisoners, and he fails miserably because he can't see the shadows anymore.
And the prisoners look at him and they laugh. They mock him. They say, "Look at this idiot. He went up out of the cave and he came back with his eyes completely ruined. Going up there is a terrible idea."
And then Socrates drops the darkest line of the allegory. He says, if this returning philosopher tried to physically unchain them and drag them up to the light, they would kill him.
Which is not a metaphor. That is literally exactly what the city of Athens did to the historical Socrates. They executed him for questioning their shadows and trying to drag them toward the truth.
It's chilling. So, bringing this all back to our perfect city, the Republic. The whole point of educating these guardians to become philosopher-kings is so they see the sun. But once they see it, we force them to go back down into the political cave. We basically say, hey, we spent 50 years educating you. Now you have to pay us back by managing the mundane laws of the city.
And Socrates argues they will be the best possible rulers precisely because they absolutely do not want the job. They look down on political power, money, and fame as dirty, trivial shadows compared to the glorious world of the forms. The only city that is safe from corruption is the one where the rulers despise ruling.
It's a brilliant paradox. But Socrates, being a sharp realist, acknowledges the tragic truth of the physical universe. Nothing physical lasts forever. Even this perfect golden city with its philosopher-kings will eventually decay and collapse.
And this next section, Tracing the Decline of Regimes, is honestly one of the most brilliant, frighteningly accurate psychological profiles ever written in political science. He traces a step-by-step devolution from the perfect aristocracy all the way down to the nightmare of tyranny.
How does the perfect city crack?
It starts with a mathematical error. The rulers, being human, eventually fail to properly calculate the incredibly complex astrological cycles required for the breeding lotteries. So a generation is born with iron and bronze accidentally mixed in with the gold. The purity is lost. These new compromised rulers neglect music and philosophy, and they start focusing heavily on gymnastics, warfare, and military reputation. This creates the second regime, timocracy.
Which is basically exactly how the city-state of Sparta operated, right?
Spot on. It's ruled by the spirited part of the soul. The timocratic man is like your classic, hyper-competitive gym bro. He's obsessed with honor and medals. He treats his slaves and subordinates very harshly because he's deeply insecure. And crucially, Socrates notes, he has a secret, dark room inside his house where he hoards private gold. He secretly loves money, but the law says he has to hide it.
Eventually, that secret love of money comes out of the closet entirely, and the society devolves into the third regime, oligarchy.
The rule of the rich. Now the mask is off, and money is literally the only standard of value. The city splits dangerously into two cities living in the same space. The heavily armed city of the ultra-rich and the desperate city of the poor, and they are constantly plotting against each other.
And what does the oligarchic soul look like?
The oligarchic man is a miser. He's the guy who has millions in the bank, but refuses to turn on the heating in winter. He ruthlessly suppresses all his other desires. He doesn't party, he doesn't travel, he doesn't enjoy art. Not because he's virtuous or temperate, but purely because he is terrified of spending a single dime.
But his greed has a macro effect. He allows a few people to buy up all the property, which creates a massive, sprawling underclass of people with literally zero stake in the society. Socrates calls them drones. He says some drones have stingers, meaning they become violent criminals, and some have no stingers, meaning they just become beggars.
And eventually, those drones wake up. The poor realize that the rich rulers are actually soft, fat, and weak from luxurious living. So the poor revolt. They kill or exile the oligarchs. And we arrive at the fourth regime, democracy.
Now, obviously, as modern people, we love democracy, but Socrates, he's definitely not a fan.
Not at all. He describes democracy as a supermarket of constitutions. It is absolutely drowning in freedom. It's a coat of many colors. You can live however you want. There is zero compulsion. If the law says the city is going to war, you can just say, nah, I'm staying home. If the law says a certain criminal is banned from the city, you might see him casually walking through the marketplace the next day.
It's an intoxicating amount of liberty, but it lacks any unifying order. And his description of the democratic soul inside the individual, I have to say, it feels devastatingly accurate to modern life.
Oh, it completely anticipates the modern attention economy. The democratic man treats all his desires as entirely equal. There's no hierarchy, no gold ruling the iron. He just yields to whatever desire happens to walk past him at any given hour. One day he gets totally drunk and listens to loud flute music. The very next day he drinks only spring water and goes on a strict diet. Then he goes hard at the gym. Then he gets totally lazy and ignores all his responsibilities. Then he reads a book and spends a week pretending to be a deep philosopher.
It's literally the lifestyle of a chaotic Instagram influencer.
Yeah.
Total freedom, dabbling in everything, absolutely no core direction or mastery.
Exactly. And Socrates argues a very dark mechanism here. Extreme, unchecked freedom inevitably produces extreme slavery. The citizens get drunk on the unmixed wine of absolute liberty. They become so sensitive that they can't tolerate even the slightest hint of authority. Teachers become terrified of their students and flatter them. Parents act like children, and children boss around their parents. The animals in the street walk around proudly, refusing to move out of the way for humans.
Complete anarchy. And in the middle of this chaotic, terrifying anarchy, the masses get desperate. They look for a strong man. They appoint a champion of the people to protect them from the remaining rich elites.
And that champion gets a taste of blood. He realizes the mob will back him no matter what. He falsely accuses his political enemies and exiles them. He drops heavy hints about canceling all debts and redistributing the land. The mob absolutely cheers him on. And before their very eyes, he physically transforms from a human protector into a wolf. We finally get the tyrant.
And we hit rock bottom. Yeah. How does the tyrant operate once he has power?
The classic playbook. He starts by smiling at everyone and making huge promises. But soon, he realizes he has to constantly stir up foreign wars, so the people are always in danger and desperately need a strong leader. Then, he gets paranoid. He purges the city of anyone who is genuinely smart, wealthy, or brave, because they're the only real threats to his power.
So the city is drained of all its talent.
Yes. He eventually has to bring in ruthless foreign mercenaries to protect him, paying them with the temple's sacred gold, because he knows the citizens secretly hate him. Finally, the people who birthed him into power realize their mistake and try to rein him in. And the tyrant turns on his own father and brutally enslaves the entire population.
So we have reached the absolute lowest depths. The tyrant is fully in charge. He has the power of the Ring of Gyges. He can do whatever he wants. So we have to answer the original question from Book 1. Is this man finally happy?
Socrates delivers the final crushing verdict. The tyrannical soul is the most wretched, miserable thing in existence. He uses 3 distinct arguments to prove it. The first is logical, based on the city-soul analogy. Because his city is enslaved, terrified, and poor, his individual soul must also be perfectly enslaved, terrified, and poor. Reason is totally locked in a dungeon. He is ruled entirely by his lawless desires.
Let's define that. What exactly are lawless desires?
Socrates describes them in a very haunting way. He says lawless desires are the dark, violent, horrific urges that only usually wake up when our reason is asleep. The dreams of incest, of eating forbidden food, of committing brutal murder. Most people keep these locked away. But the tyrant lives that nightmare while he is awake 24/7. He is driven mad by a master passion he can never satisfy. He is utterly terrified of assassination every single waking moment. He can never, ever have a true friend, only flattering slaves and deadly rivals. He is a prisoner in his own palace.
Wow, okay, then what is the second proof?
The experience argument. Remember the 3 parts of the soul: reason, spirit, appetite, which translates to 3 types of people: wisdom-loving, honor-loving, and gain-loving. The money lover only knows the pleasure of wealth. He thinks learning truth is a boring waste of time. The honor lover only knows the thrill of victory. He thinks truth is useless without fame. But the philosopher has experienced all 3. Growing up, he experienced the bodily pleasures of food and money. He experienced the honor of physical competition. And he alone has experienced the divine joy of grasping the eternal truth.
So because he is the only one who has tasted all 3 dishes on the menu, He is the only qualified food critic.
Exactly. And his expert verdict is that the pleasure of wisdom is infinitely superior and sweeter than the others.
And the third and final argument is about the very biological nature of pleasure itself. The leaky jar concept.
Right. Socrates points out that almost all of our physical pleasures are actually just a temporary relief from pain. Think about it. Eating an amazing meal is only deeply pleasurable because you are suffering from the pain of hunger. Drinking water is only amazing when you have the pain of thirst. It's like pouring water into a leaky jar. You feel a painful lack, but it immediately leaks out, and you are hungry again tomorrow. It's fleeting, and it's ultimately empty.
But intellectual pleasure is different.
Completely different. Learning a beautiful eternal truth isn't fixing a pain. It is filling your soul with something that actually permanently exists. It is pure, unmixed pleasure. So the tyrant who spends his entire miserable life desperately trying to fill that leaky jar of lust, greed, and paranoia is actually in a permanent state of intense suffering. The just man, however, even if he doesn't have the magical ring, even if he is poor, has absolute internal peace and harmony.
So the final verdict is permanently locked in. Justice equals genuine happiness. Injustice equals pure misery. Thrasymachus and Glaucon are defeated. But Plato isn't done. He decides to zoom out one last incredible time, beyond the soul, beyond the city, to the very edge of the cosmos, the myth of
This is the ultimate cosmic mic drop to end the Republic. It's a very early, very detailed near-death experience story.
Yeah, is a brave soldier who is killed in battle. But 12 days later, as he is lying on the funeral pyre about to be burned, he miraculously wakes up, and he tells everyone what he saw on the other side.
And what he saw was not just a vague, comforting white light. He saw a massive, terrifyingly precise cosmic bureaucracy. He says the souls of the dead arrive at a mysterious crossroads with 4 openings. 2 go up into the sky, 2 go down into the earth. There are judges sitting there. The just souls are sent up to the heavens for an unimaginably beautiful 1,000-year journey of joy. But the unjust souls are sent plunging down into the earth for 1,000 years of agonizing punishment.
And the math here is exact. The penalty is precisely 10 times the crime. If you murdered someone, you literally suffer the agony of dying 10 times over. If you did a good deed, you were rewarded 10 times over.
But for the absolute worst of the worst, the unrepentant tyrants, they don't even get to finish the 1,000 years. Sees the soul of a horribly cruel tyrant named Ardiaeus trying to crawl out of the chasm. But the mouth of the cavern literally roars at him. Demonic men made of fire grab him, flay his skin off, and hurl him down into Tartarus forever.
But for the vast majority of regular souls, after their 1,000-year sentence is up, they all meet back up in a beautiful meadow. And here they are faced with the most important moment of their entire existence. They have to choose their next life for reincarnation.
And the visual imagery here is stunning. They travel to the spindle of necessity, this massive shaft of light holding the entire spinning universe together. There are sirens singing the harmony of the spheres, and the 3 fates, Lachesis, Clotho, and Atropos, are spinning the threads of destiny.
But here is the crucial philosophical point. The fates scatter lottery numbers on the ground to decide the order in which the souls get to pick their next life from a massive pile of options. But a prophet stands up and declares, virtue has no master. The responsibility is entirely with the chooser. God is blameless.
It is a staggering declaration of radical human free will. Your cosmic lottery number might dictate when you choose, but you alone decide what kind of life you select. And watches them make their choices, and it is a tragedy of human error.
It really is.
Yeah.
Like the very first guy in line. And keep in mind, this guy just came down from the heavenly 1,000-year journey. He rushes up to the pile and immediately grabs the life of the greatest tyrant. He is blinded by the promise of wealth and absolute power.
But he didn't read the fine print.
No. He chose in pure haste. And then he looks closer at the life he just locked himself into, and he realizes it is fated to end with him eating his own children in a terrible tragedy. He completely loses it. He starts weeping, beating his chest, wailing. But who does he blame? He blames bad luck. He blames the fates. He blames the gods. He blames everyone except his own greed.
Which perfectly proves Socrates' point. This guy had been good in his previous life, but only out of mindless habit and living in a decent city. He didn't actually have philosophy. He didn't have an anchor. So the second he faced real pressure and temptation, he destroyed himself.
And keeps watching the famous Greek heroes choose. And it's so sad because they almost all choose based purely on their unhealed past trauma. Orpheus, whose wife was killed, hates women so much he chooses to be reincarnated as a swan so he doesn't have to be born of a woman. Ajax, the great warrior who felt cheated of his armor, refuses to be a human ever again. He becomes a lion. Agamemnon, the king who was murdered by his wife, chooses to be an eagle.
They are all trapped by their past pain. But then there is Odysseus, the man of many turns, the ultimate survivor. By pure chance, he draws the absolute last lottery number. He gets the worst pick of the leftovers.
But he doesn't panic. Because of his immense suffering in his past life, he has finally learned the lesson. He wanders around the back of the pile, digging through the rejected lives that everyone else threw away in disgust, and he finds it. He finds the humble, quiet life of a private man who simply minds his own business. Odysseus picks it up, smiles, and says that even if he had drawn the very first lottery ticket, he would have chosen this exact same life gladly.
He finally understood. He realized that the quiet, philosophically just life, free from the hunger for power, is the only true prize in the universe.
And all the souls march through a scorching desert to the river Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. They are forced to drink the water. The foolish souls, driven by thirst, drink way too much and completely forget everything they learned. The wise souls drink only the bare minimum required, just enough to forget the trauma, but keeping the core philosophical lesson deeply embedded in their character.
And then at midnight, amidst a terrifying thunderstorm and a roaring earthquake, the souls are violently shot upward like shooting stars, hurtling toward their new physical births.
It's an incredibly cinematic, breathtaking ending to a very dense book.
Yeah.
Socrates finishes the story, turns to his young friend Glaucon, and says, "And so, Glaucon, the tale was saved from perishing." He tells him that if we truly believe this story, if we believe the soul is immortal and capable of enduring all evil and all good, we will always hold fast to the upward path. We will practice perfect justice combined with true wisdom.
Because in the end, whether we are existing down here in a physical body for a short 80 years, or whether we are walking that 1,000-year cosmic journey in the afterlife, justice is the one and only way to remain friends with ourselves and friends with the gods.
You know, it really strikes me that throughout this entire massive deep dive, we've been painstakingly drawing the blueprints for this republic, this flawlessly perfect political city. But Socrates openly admits near the very end that this city probably doesn't exist anywhere on Earth, and maybe it never will.
And he immediately follows that up by saying it absolutely does not matter if it exists on Earth. He says it stands as a pattern in heaven for anyone who wishes to look at it. The ultimate goal of this entire massive dialogue was never really to build a physical utopia in Athens or in modern-day New York. The point was to teach you how to build it inside yourself. Yeah. You have the power to establish the constitution of the perfect republic within the borders of your own soul. You can consciously install reason upon the throne as your own internal philosopher-king. You can train your spirit to be the brave guardian of your values, and you can tame the multi-headed beast of your appetites.
That is the ultimate enduring takeaway of the Republic. You, listening to this right now, you are the city. And every single day, with every choice you make, you are deciding whether your internal city is going to devolve into a chaotic democracy, a miserable tyranny, or a beautiful, harmonious republic.
Wonderfully said.
This has been a truly massive journey today. We went all the way from the dark depths of the Ring of Gorgias to the blazing light of the sun and out to the cosmic spindle of necessity. Thank you truly for sticking with us and walking the upward path today.
It was an absolute pleasure to unpack this.
Keep building that perfect city within yourselves. We'll see you on the next deep dive.